Irene just fixed the lighting.
Well, it didn't fix it. It's still pretty crappy, but it's better than it was before. We're not as washed out, at least.
I'll bet you've been wondering where we've been.
I've been wondering where I've been.
I know where I've been. I've been sitting right here on this love seat. I just finished filming some show material for Irene and her business, and the next day I woke up and I couldn't move.
You could move, you just had a big gigantic owie.
And my knee hurt like crazy. So I did all the usual things to deal with joint pain. I'm getting pretty close to 70. And I have some arthritis in various parts of my body. Yeah, such is life. You just deal with it and you move on.
Beats the alternative.
Yeah, it does. So I spent 3 days doing the usual treatments to get over my leg pain. Normally it's just in the ankle. It started off with a little bit in the ankle, but a lot in the knee. And by Tuesday, it was a real mess. One of the things that a lot of people talk about and don't really think about is, what do you do when? Well, it's just the two of us here on the homestead. And fortunately, Irene's able-bodied right now, so that she's able to pick up a lot of the stuff. So what's happened for the past week, Irene?
Well, we did a casting session, and that was about the last thing that you did any setup for. You did the setup for the actual burnout and stuff like that, and then I ran the casting session by myself while you were gone, running errands. And, I know how to run the generators. I can change the oil on the generators if I need to. I certainly know how to gas them up, so all those kind of things are pretty standard for me. I know how to look at most of the equipment in the utility building. I don't have the level of knowledge that Henry has, but I can tell the rough stuff of what's going on. I know if we're running out of juice. I can tell, if something is tripped off, I can reset things. If we're having problems with the pump, I know how to flip that off, all that kind of stuff. So basically, while he's been sitting on the sofa, I finished the casting session. I've been processing all of the pieces that we cast in both of the casting sessions, because we did 2 back-to-back, and getting that stuff ready, plus packing boxes into the truck, because I like to get most of the stuff packed into the truck about a week before we go somewhere, because it's just a lot of heavy labor, and you're going up into a truck, and we do have a lift gate, but there's still a certain amount of up and down that can really kind of wear you out, and getting yourself tired and slightly sore right before you leave for an event is a really bad plan, because when you get to the other end, you're going to have to offload everything and set up everything.
Yeah, so when we go to an event, there's a lot of heavy physical labor at the beginning of the event. We set up the pavilion tent. We move everything out of the truck. We set everything up in the shop. There's a lot of weight there. There's a lot of going up and down. Even, as Irene said, we have the lift gate. You have to step up and step down, because it's not really efficient or effective to be running the lift gate all the time to go up and down.
Usually what we do is one of us will stand outside and the other person will shovel boxes out onto the tailgate, and that means there's not as much up and down. And
that makes offloading and setting up go a whole lot faster.
And we do the same thing when it's time to put it all away. We'll load the tailgate, somebody will go inside, start throwing the stuff in place, and the other person will keep bringing out boxes and throwing them on the tailgate. It's just a optimization of functionality.
The less energy that we have to expend picking things up and moving them around, the better off we are.
Right.
We fill that box truck from the front to the back, the sides to the sides, and the top to the bottom.
What I'm doing right now is I've been sorting boxes, and I've gotten a bunch of boxes out. Fortunately, earlier this year, after the last event, I had already pre-sorted a bunch of the boxes. So I knew where things were. I'd already done some of the cleanup that needs to happen after an event. And I double-checked that the other day to make sure a couple of items had been cleaned, and they had been. I can tell when I open them because I repack them a specific way, and you can smell the disinfectant too. So it's like, okay, I did that. And I thought I had, but it's been months, so you have to double-check these things. Brought a couple of things out and said, you need to take care of this because this is not my category. I think he's got a box of batteries sitting over there that he has to recharge because we use those for lighting at events because we do not have electricity at this event. I'm still running my business, so that means I still need to be packaging up things. I've got 5 orders that need to go out tomorrow. Yeah. And most of it came in either Friday afternoon, too late to get to the post office, or over the weekend, which is fine. That's very typical, especially if I've done any kind of ad campaign. It's not uncommon to see that happen. But a lot of times people have time on the weekends where they don't have time during the week. And they sit down and they go, wow, I really do need some stuff. Let me go find some. Which I'm good with that.
Now, normally I'd be doing some other things while Irene's doing the finishing and sorting and polishing that goes on with her aspect of the business.
Right.
So usually I'll do a fair amount of the housework. I'll cook.
You'll cook the meals.
Pretty much all the meals.
One of the things that we normally do, and we try not to leave it quite to the last minute. This year was a little worse, but it's the first event of the year, and the first event of the year is always the worst because you're kind of scraping things out of various locations where you stash them at the end of the season and trying to triple check to make sure you're not leaving anything important home. I'm shifting some of the stuff slightly in my booth. I'm not going to carry books anymore. I'm going to just sell the ones I've got left online. They're too heavy. And it becomes problematic if your weather is bad to try and keep them dry and unwrinkled and all that other sort of stuff. And you get people who come in with dirty hands and want to touch the books, and you're like, I'm sorry, I wouldn't let you touch my shovel, much less my books.
While Irene was busy working with the castings that we had just finished doing, I had my problem start. Mm-hmm. And 3 days in, I texted my doctor.
Fortunately, we have a very lucky scenario with our physician. You can actually talk to the office. They will talk to you back without you having to come in. You can get advice over a telephone call, over a text, that sort of thing. It's not one of these things where you have to come in every single time you have a zit.
Yeah. I texted my primary care physician, and I had a nice text exchange and then set up an emergency phone call for the next day. And if you've ever tried going to a doctor, you know it's impossible to get in touch with people on any kind of short notice. But with this particular practice, they are available. And so the next day, probably 12 hours after my first contact with them, I had a phone call. And since I have some medical knowledge, I was able to provide him some diagnostic information over the phone. We talked about it, and he determined what I could do for that night. And I was set up for the next day for an emergency on-site visit to have an ultrasound done of my knee. Now, I'm fine, well, as fine as being in significant pain can be. But I have arthritis. I've known I've had arthritis for many years. That complicates things. But I ended up with an infection in my knee. There's no skin break. It's just one of those things that happens. And it happened to me at a really bad time.
It could be worse. I could have had to take him out and shoot him if it would happen right before our Pennsylvania event. But, this is the kind of crap that happens in normal life. There's no such thing as a convenient time for somebody to get sick, but usually right before an event, when I'm working on polishing up things and moving boxes and stuff like that, Henry will do a lot of the cooking for the event. He'll make beef stew, he'll make sometimes split pea soup, chicken pot pie, and we'll get that canned up in jars.
Normally we do all this in jars, which is a lot of weight. It's glass. And that's one of the reasons why we bought the freeze dryer. And
Right.
so we've experimented with beef stew and chicken pot pie in the freeze dryer. And those are all bagged up and ready to go. Irene's been doing some more bagging today because we had more things coming out of the freeze dryer. I could do some things. But you need to really think about what are you going to do if one of you is incapacitated. By incapacitated, I mean sitting on a love seat. For me to get to the other end of the house is 10 minutes worth of struggle.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things I could do to make it easier. I could take major league opioid painkillers.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the options my physician gave me. The problem with that is if there's another problem, I don't want to be having my brain being clouded up that much by opioids.
Right. He's pretty useless as is.
Thanks.
Like I said, we still haven't figured out what he did with his keys. And he has zero memory of half of this past week.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just like, well, we did this. And he's, oh, we did that? Yeah. So, and that's not uncommon when somebody's been ill because he just wasn't feeling all that great. He was falling asleep. He was, just general infection sort of thing. Not an uncommon scenario. But if you add, I could at least ask him questions or take him a screenshot of something and send it to him if I had a question about something that was in the utility building. If he's buzzed out, that's not going to be an option. And like I said, I could handle the vast majority of the stuff around here. I could do the meals, I could do all the stuff. The big advantage of having him doing all the heavy-duty cooking and stuff right before we leave is I don't have to think about it. We will sit down and we will plan out meals for an event, and we'll make sure we have all the groceries. The day that we drop our pussycat off at the kennel to go sit with her buddies for a week, any last-minute groceries get picked up then. Or sometimes even on the way to an event. We try not to do that, especially if you want to be there at a reasonable time. But depending on the scheduling for various events, sometimes we actually hit a grocery store at the other end of the trip because it's easier. When we go to California, it's that way. You pick up the milk, butter, eggs, sour cream, that sort of stuff, or lettuce right when you get there, so you're not dealing with trying to transport that and refrigerate it. But usually he handles a lot of the general... We work the logistics out together, but then he handles a lot of the general process of producing the meals and getting that all set. And he knows how to do the canning. Sometimes I step in for a minute to help just because 2 pairs of hands is great in terms of speed.
It makes it a lot faster.
It's just faster to have, he's loading jars, I'm double checking levels and wiping rims and putting lids on and stuff like that. And next thing you know, it's all done. That wasn't available this week.
So I really encourage you and your family, or whoever is with you on your homestead, to sit down and answer the following question. If my major source of labor and skill on my homestead is restricted to sitting in a chair, not able to move, not able to feed themselves by going to the kitchen to make a sandwich, if they're dependent upon me for every single thing, how will we survive?
Right. How do you handle it? I mean, I see families that have where the husband does all of the chickens, goats, pigs, this, that, the other thing. I'm not even sure that some of the other family members know how to do it. And many, many, many years ago, we used to belong to a GMC club for people who had ancient GMC motorhomes.
Yeah, now they're a 50-year-old antique now. We still own one.
One of the things that they did at one of their get-togethers was they asked a question at the beginning of one of the meetings. This is a social club, but they also did some practical stuff on how to take care of your RV and do all this kind of... And the big question was how many, because usually the husband's the driver, how many women in this room can drive the RV?
Let's suppose your husband is hospitalized or, heaven forbid, he dies on the road.
Right.
How are you going to get yourself and your motorhome back home?
Right. You could be across the United States somewhere. And there are insurance policies you could buy that will provide you with a driver to get you home to wherever the heck you're going. But isn't it easier if you can drive yourself? And I'm one of 2 or 3 women in the room who raised their hand because we had purposefully practiced. We went out in a big, I've never driven anything 26 feet long.
That's one real life example from our past life of what do you need to think about and what do you do? Well, in our case, we always say, well, what happens if? If your primary way of getting stuff from point A to point B is laid up in the chair for a day, that's an inconvenience. If they're laid up for 2 days, it's a little more of an inconvenience. If they're laid up for 3 days, it's even more of an inconvenience. But what if they're laid up for a month or a week or 10 days? What happens then? Here on our homestead, water company is our water company. The electric company is our electric company. The garbage company is our garbage company. Everything is on us. If we need it and it has to work, we have to fix it.
Right.
So one of the things that happened in the middle of all of this, we had a receptacle in the utility building, which is where our electric system resides, start to fail.
Right.
And when did it fail?
Oh, about 11:30 at night.
The first time. And then it failed again.
At 1 something in the morning. I know this because every time we lose power, it shuts off the freeze dryer, and it would be a momentary power outage, and that makes my phone go beep beep. That's in the bedroom next to me where it's charging. So anytime the power goes out and when it comes back on, the phone goes beep and my watch goes ding. So you get beep beep ding, which will wake me up out of a sound sleep.
So the reason why this was happening is because the batteries were low. The batteries are low because the generator wasn't actually charging the batteries.
Oh, and we had 2 solid weeks of overcast.
Yeah, so we started with a deficit.
We've had the lousiest weather. It's been, in comparison to some parts of the United States where they've had, feet of snow or, torrential rains or something like that. We've just had a light sprinkle. But we've had a light sprinkle for 2 solid weeks with no solar. I mean, and during the middle of the day, if you want to see something clearly, you have to turn a light on.
So you have to have power if you have electrical things that need to run. And unfortunately, when this power outage happened, we had a freeze dryer running. Otherwise, I just shut the
If we hadn't
computers
had it,
off. I'd turn off her phone and say, I'll deal with it when it's light. But we had a freeze dryer in the middle of the cycle, which meant that it had to keep running. So I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning by myself. I took my cane and carefully hobbled out to the utility building to deal with the issue. I had the screwdrivers and other things with me, and I turned the generator off, tested the electricity to make sure there was no backfeeding going on, so I knew I wouldn't be electrocuting myself. And I started looking at the receptacle and the plug. And what I discovered was that in the last 17 years, the plug and receptacle have degraded. I was able to make it work again, and it's still working fine for right now. I'm going to have to replace them.
Right, and he called around. Gosh, you spent a while the other day calling around. That's something he can do from the sofa. Calling around and trying to find a replacement. So far, we haven't found one. So I'm not sure where we're going to have to go, but someplace. Or get it in by mail.
It'll be getting an online order delivered here. And unfortunately, the delivery would happen while we're gone on our event because the delivery times are not short. But in any case, it was not fun standing out in not freezing cold, but cold weather
But it was drizzling.
with a breeze, a lot of breeze, with a flashlight in my mouth to see what was going on. But I got it working. Now, if I had been on this love seat with a broken leg and being unable to go out there, what would have happened? Well, I think we'd have just abandoned the freeze-dry cycle.
Yeah, we would have, because normally if the power goes out there in the middle of the night, or it's flipping on and off because the power is marginal, we just take our phones off the chargers, because what makes them dink is the on and off thing. So if I've got a battery backup on the clock. I've had one of those for 35 years. I always had battery backups on my clocks because we lived places where the power would go off. And it might only go out for 15 minutes, but then your alarm doesn't go off at the right time if you need to be somewhere, like, getting the kids to school. So we would just ignore it, because the world's not going to end.
There's a lot of things to think about, a lot of contingencies to be concerned about, but it really struck home for me when I was laying here on the love seat, reclined back, that this is a problem. Mm-hmm. It's a real problem for people who live a homestead life. It's even more of a problem who live an off-grid homestead life. So you need to look seriously at your family. If you have a family around you that lives with you, who can take care of a problem when one arises? Mm-hmm. Do they know how to take care of it? Are they interested in taking care of it? Because knowing and being able to and being interested,
willing to,
they're separate things.
You get a certain amount of resistance to being helpful sometimes. I mean, I'll have to admit, when I'm sitting here and you say, I can't get my shoe on, can you put it on for me? It's kind of the last thing on my list to do sometimes, but it still has to be done, so I get the shoe on.
The homestead lifestyle seems to be an idyllic one. It can be a pastoral one, it can be beautiful, it can be a lot of different things. But a lot of people don't think about the darker side of homesteading. That is the ordinary things that go with life. Mm-hmm. A broken foot, a broken ankle, a burn, a major injury, an infection. By the way, I'm getting better.
Mm-hmm. The album's much better now.
I think, but it's not going to be until Thursday that I know how much better I'm doing. Conclude our show today. I have an infection in my leg. As a consequence, I have a sore ankle. I have a really sore knee.
Well, anytime you start walking funny, next thing you know, your other knee, your other ankle, the back, the shoulder, everything is going to hurt.
And I have a sore hip. Mm-hmm. We're treating my infection with the most probable antibiotic for the most probable bacteria. Mm-hmm. Is it going to work? I don't know. The reason why we didn't take a culture is that the chances are 9 out of 10 that by puncturing my skin and going in to get a culture, I'd have an infection of major proportions that would erupt as a result of that puncture. Mm-hmm. So we elected to put that off until the end of this week, if it's necessary. I'm hoping it isn't necessary.
But I'm mentally prepared that if on Thursday we get the news that this has not fixed it well enough, I call the person in charge of the event that I'm going to and I say, I won't be there, my husband's sick.
Yeah, so the next step for me is continue on through the end of the week, see how my knee is. If there's still some swelling, is back up to Flagstaff to see my doctor, to have a new ultrasound of my knee done. If there's still fluid in my knee, we'll be pulling some off with a needle and then sending that for culture, which will take until the next week, unfortunately.
And then if that happens, we won't be going to the event, because if you have some sort of a flare-up the middle of the weekend, which is when that kind of stuff usually happens, is within 24 hours of taking fluid, that's when you'll get a major flare-up. I need to be able to drive him to the hospital, not to be off in Timbuktu someplace wondering where the nearest hospital is.
Yeah. So, that's not such a brief update of what's been going on, but now you know a little more about what's been going on. A lot of it has to do with me having an infection show up unexpectedly in my leg. Mm-hmm. I've never had one of these before. There's always a first time for everything.
Well, usually, I've stabbed my fingers 9,000 million times over the last 55 years or 65 years or something, and never had any trouble. I mean, I heal well. I've got a couple of dings on my knuckles right now. I had a spot that I finally got a splinter out of yesterday, so that's doing much better. Things like that happen. But I remember probably 10 years ago, I stuck myself with something when I was cleaning glass beads that I had made, and I went up with an infection, and I did all the things you're supposed to do in terms of cleaning it, in terms of soaking it in hot water and everything else. And when it didn't clear, I went to a local Doc in the Box down in Chino and got meds. Because you don't want to wind up with a septic infection.
Yeah, so the chances are that if this doesn't really knock it down and clear it, I would say probably by Tuesday or Wednesday, I have a much more serious bacteria in my knee. And unfortunately, that means I'm going to have to take serious antibiotics. What I'm hoping is that if I have that happen, it's not MRSA, which is a really, really nasty infection.
MRSA is very common in Arizona, too. That's another thing I would mention to people is if you live in a specific area, start paying attention to what kind of infections people get.
That's kind of...
Not very cheerful, but it's just one of those things to be aware of. You don't dwell on it.
When you have this kind of a problem happen, it really makes you refocus on what can happen.
Right.
And unfortunately, it did happen. We're dealing with it. I'm pretty hopeful that we'll be going down to the event. I'm sure Irene's
But mentally,
hopeful.
I'm prepared that I have to cancel.
So...
It makes it easier. I'm still going to keep working. I still have work to do when we get done with this today.
If we don't go to this event, we'll go to the next event, and she'll sell it there. So,
Well, and I'll do a post online that says, "Hey, this is what happened."
yep.
If you were planning to see me down there, contact me privately. We'll make a deal.
Thinking ahead. Well, that's it. We can't keep on talking because
we'll be here 3 weeks from now.
I still have to hobble down to the office and get on the computer and edit this show so that we can put it up. Because these things don't happen by themselves. By the way, that's the other reason about why we weren't online for the last week.
Right.
It doesn't happen by itself.
No, and that is one of the things I have not learned to do, is to do the editing.
And, the thing is, right now, her time is much more valuable spent on her business, because there are aspects of that business that I cannot do. And it takes time. Even with all the years of skills that she has, it takes time. And she still has to make that move forward. Things have to happen.
If I can't go to this event, it just means I'll be better stocked on my Etsy store, and I'll keep moving forward on other projects, because I have things that I'd hoped to get done for this event that just isn't going to happen.
Say goodbye, Irene.
So be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because we're going to be doing lots of stuff. It's just a matter of what that stuff turns out to be.
Mostly right now, I'll be sitting on this love seat with my leg propped up.
Oh, and he discovered one of the joys of being an electric love seat when the power goes out.
Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
That was a big surprise.
Well, I'll tell you what I would have done. I would have slid sideways.
I was in the process of sliding sideways, but my knee hurt so much. But you got to get off. You got to get off.
Yeah, and you can't get off that way because your feet are stuck up in the air.
Boy, I'd be in real trouble if you were in the other side.
Yeah, because I could get out, but then you'd be stuck, and I'd be trying to figure out how to. And there's no reset on this. We can say go back to square one. Plug it into a battery. Do we have a battery to plug this into? No, we don't.
No. Something to think about.